The national security problem in international relations. National security is particularly central because states dominate many of the conditions that determine security at the other two levels, and states seem unable to coexist with each other in harmony. In order to have a proper understanding of the national security problem, one must first understand the concept of security. Security is not the only concept through which the national security problem can be approached. A more fully developed concept of security can be seen to lie between the extremes of power and peace, incorporating most of their insights and adding more of its own. The principal evidence for the underdevelopment of security as a concept in international relations is to be found in its use in literature. The foreign military and economic policies of state, the intersection of these policies in areas of change or dispute, and the general structure of relations which they create are all analyzed in terms of aspirations to achieve national or international security. The security dilemma idea is widely acknowledged in the literature, but the Cold War environment proved to be infertile soil for such a liberal seed, restricting most people's view to the action reaction dynamics of rival powers. The domination of the concept by the idea of national security and the militarized interpretation of security to which this approach easily, though not necessarily, gave rise was criticized by several authors as excessively narrow and hollow. Leonard Beaton similarly argued for the need to expand conceptions of security outward from the limits of parochial national security to include a range of systematic considerations. Because security was seen primarily in the terms of national power by both policymakers and strategics, an unhelpful uniformity dominated. The persistent underdevelopment of thinking about security, despite the fact that disputes at the empirical level often arose from the lack of any deeper and more general understanding of the concept, can be explained in at least five different ways. The domain and contradictions of security have not been adequately explored, and as this book hopes to demonstrate, the reason cannot be found in the inherent difficulty of the task. Security was, in any case, already sullied by its association with the power model. Security also suffered neglect because of the methodological upheaval which consumed the field of international relations from the late 1950s to the mid 1970s. Behavioralism, with its scientific, value free, and quantitative concerns, was by definition not suited to the universe of essentially contested concepts. Threats in the international system are nearly always real enough to make their exaggeration credible. At an extreme, the need for national security can even be evoked as a reason for not discussing it. Security is an intensely political concept, and explorations of this aspect will be a recurrent theme of subsequent chapters. Both traditional realism and strategic studies were vulnerable to the interdependence critic. Realism, because it no longer reflected the preoccupation of much of the international agenda, and strategic studies, because after 3 decades of development and implementation, its central doctrine of deterrence provided neither intellectual nor practical security. Common security emphasized the interdependence of security relations as opposed to the national security priorities of traditional strategies. It is the way, and also because increasing number of people wanted a real change from a status quo made dangerous by the return of Cold War and recession, and foundations were laid. No more than that, for a convergence in the realistic and the idealistic agendas. Operating somewhat in the traditional of the International Institute for Strategic Studies annual strategic survey, Brown argues specifically from the multifaceted trends and developments in world affairs. Because security is an essential contested concept, it naturally generates questions as well as answers. It encompasses several important contradictions and a host of nuances, all of which can cause confusion if not understood. Although precise definitions will always be controversial, the general sense of what one is talking about is nevertheless clear. The political effects of physical capabilities in the case of power, the pursuit of fair outcomes when behaviors is contested in the case of justice. In thinking security states and societies are sometimes in harmony with each other, sometimes opposed. Because the structure of the international system is anarchy without central authority in all of its major organizational dimensions political, economics, societal. The natural focus of security concerns in the units. The objective of this intellectual track is not to arrive somewhere new, but to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. For international studies, the security approach both opens up a new perspective on the field and confirms the centrality of neurologist insights to any understanding of the international system. To say this is not to say either that relations between states are inevitably or even probably violent under anarchy. Neither it is to say that international anarchy makes cooperation likely or impossible. Violent conflicts is always possible under anarchy and in somewhat circumstances likely. Strategic studies already has both a clear identity and well-established presence as a subfield of international studies. Its military focus gives it not only intellectual and social coherence, but also a useful, indeed vital, role in the division of labor within the field as a whole. In relation to the rather more parochial issue of the place of strategic studies with international studies, the most conspicuous room for improvement is in communicating with other specialism in both directions. I conclude that while there is a very strong case for developing international security studies and establishing its identity as a source of insight on policy, there is no good case for doing so within strategic studies.